Usually when you ask someone to flip a coin, there are only two outcomes. The coin either lands on heads or tails. But what if I told you there's a third outcome? An unseen, overlooked, and most likely improbable result. That of course being, what if you got the coin to land on its edge? This isn't just a physical problem to be solved with scientific means, but rather a metaphor used to rationalize a philosophical dilemma. The rationalization of this dilemma would be seeing the sides of a coin as choices in situations of great importance, where there are only really two foreseeable outcomes, each side having their positives and negatives. In our haste, we choose one of the two options, seemingly the one that is seen as more preferable in the moment. Therefore, you can argue if both sides have somewhat of negative consequences, then it might be better seeing the edge of the coin and view another choice not thought of before. In the modern digital age, with the intercommunicational power of social media, the influx of freedom of speech has massively grown, with each community, sub-community, and political groups having platforms to speak on their ideologies. Of course, having over 5 billion people on the internet means that not everyone is going to align with your certain beliefs. Perhaps the largest and recent of internet problems that could be related to our proverbial coin is that of cancel culture.
Okay. So my opinion on cancel culture is that I don't really I feel as though there are people who actually believe they're doing the right thing and people who just want to see someone else burn and suffer. And I feel like cancel culture is just the modern day equivalent of when we used to burn people for being witches, or you know, we'd take the local thief and cut off his hands type thing in front of everybody. That's what I essentially think it comes down to and boils down to.
I think so. Yeah. I think like to an extent, like it definitely has been, yeah, it has definitely been used to like silence like people who just like don't have the same views. But then also like it has to depend what these views are. Like obviously if it's like something that's harmful, then that's a different situation. That's a different like scenario. But if it's like just like a difference in beliefs, and yeah.
I think so, definitely. I think that's just a thing of thinking logically about something, and just because you hear something on the internet or someone tells you something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And if you really want to be passionate about something, whether you're for or against it, you should do the research yourself beforehand from sources that are actually authentic, so you can educate yourself and then other people who might be misinformed about the topic, who are just jumping on board for no reason. I'd like to say I'm a pretty open-minded person, but when it comes to things that I'm passionate about, I generally just don't jump into stuff like that anyways, just because,
Like you try to keep your biases in check, I suppose.
yeah, pretty much. I'm always willing to hear other people out, so I'm not like, yeah, I'm not like too passionate about stuff, and, half the time I can't be bothered doing the research for myself, so then I'm just not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Because why would I if I haven't actually bothered to look into it fully?
This highlights the hypocrisy of the current online world, showing how people will align themselves to certain ideals in a guise to seem more noble or altruistic. Another way that the three sides of the coin can be explained is by the Witcher's notion of evil.
Evil is evil, Stragabor. Lesser, greater, middling. It's all the same. If I have to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer not to choose at all.
The two sides of the coin and their represented choices can be the most clear to a person, and of course they will choose the lesser of the evil, but as the clip shows, you don't need to make those choices at all. Now I know that you might be thinking that there is no chance in getting a coin to land on its edge, and you're right. I mean, the chances are so undeniably slim that the probability to have a coin land on its edge is in 1 in 6,000. I mean, most of us may know that there's another option, but in our haste to make a decision, it is mostly overlooked due to its unclear outcome. I think it could be said that people, myself included, gravitate towards rich stories for inspiration when it comes to questions of reality. Now I have done the same thing, even with this idea of the coin. I would have never realized the philosophical idea if it wasn't for my exposure to the Legacy of Cain series. In the first chapter, Cain is given two monumental choices that can shift the balance of the world entirely. to sacrifice himself to restore balance to the world, but in doing so causes the extinction of his entire species, or to reject the sacrifice and condemn the world to an eternity of collapse in order to see the continuation of his race. Canonically, Cain chooses the latter outcome, initially due to his selfishness, but as centuries passed, he realized that he wouldn't want to continue ruling over a collapsing world, and understood that even if he did sacrifice himself all those years ago, it wouldn't have been the end of the world's corruption. Both options were leading to a dead end.
You said it yourself, Cain. There are only two sides to your coin.
Apparently so. But suppose you throw a coin enough times. Suppose one day it lands on its edge.
This exemplifies the difficulty one may find when trying to land a coin on its edge, and you could take this idea in either two ways. You perceive the countless tosses as taking time to process your choices and becoming patient to time to reveal a third choice. Or, by understanding the hidden philosophical ideas of determinism within Legacy of Cain, you might understand that fate and probability may never allow you to see the edge of the coin, which by then, you change the environment to have the coin land on its edge. Now as humans, we're no strangers to changing the environment to our needs. So then why not change fate to our desired outcome? I suppose you might have been thinking to yourself that the entire three-sided coin idea can just be succinctly described as compromise. And I suppose you're right to a degree.
I guess it's like the gray, like, you know how people say like, oh, you can't just look in black and white, like the gray area. I feel like, yeah, it's like, you know, you can't just look like one extreme to the next extreme. You have to like take things from both sides and like come in the middle, if that makes sense.
You want to have the positive of both sides without the negatives of each, creating a win-win situation of sorts. But it's quite deeper than that, as it's more about understanding all sides and choices and not to be hasty with your decisions. I hold this philosophical ideal highly within my life, as it allows me to rationalize otherwise stressful and seemingly constrained choices. So in conclusion, I ask this of you. Will you match move by move the machinations of fate? Or will you challenge fate for another throw to defy the tyrannous stars?